Welcome to Civil Dissent. These podcasts are about you. Ticia and Ron are speaking as citizen activists responding to the explosive conditions of our times that affect us all. In the spirit of the fairness doctrine, we will air conflicting views and you will determine what is valid. We will provide you with leads and contacts to government, business, community organizations, and more. And you take the action. In democracy, information and participation are key. Use your key, your voice, for a better world. Ticia and Dr. Ron have each traveled to more than a dozen countries and have studied political science, anthropology, and communications. We differ on our views, but we agree that our friendship is more than important than our differences. We hope you feel the same. Now, without further ado, Ticia and Ron on Civil Dissent.
Well, hello again. This is Ron Ian Haben, and I'm with my friend Leticia Bauza, and welcome to Civil Dissent, as I just said. And we have a rather interesting and thought-provoking show today. And before we get into that, which is going to be on morality and medical research.
Involving animals.
And before we do that, we always have a personal check-in. So, Leticia, what's been going on for you this week?
Well, interestingly enough, I fell upon some information that plays into the show that we're doing today on animals. And that's that what's being done now is environmental DNA is being collected, for example, from water sources, so that they're able to determine what bacteria is in the water, what fungus is in the water. They can gather information from feathers and hair that they find, all without having to capture any animals, which I think is incredibly wonderful. They can even detect whether there's predators that are invasive species in the area. And I think that's phenomenal. The other thing that caught my attention was that they're finding that more and more animals dream, and they're recognizing that they dream the same way we do during REM sleep. And that the eye movement indicates that. And that includes not just animals, but insects, reptiles, spiders. And I think it's absolutely fascinating. If only we could really tell what the imaging is like in their minds as they dream, that would be fantastic. So those are the two things that caught my attention.
Terrific. Well, I have some good news about the behavior of man and animals and creatures, and that is, first, the bad news. The bad news is that humanity has helped to raise the water temperatures, particularly around our own Florida peninsula, to the point where they've been 99 degrees, they've been over 101 degrees in the water. And so many fish species and certainly coral die. They can't handle that level of heat, which is largely been caused by humanity. And so humans are doing something really intelligent and revolutionary. They are removing coral around the peninsula, and what they're doing is freezing them. And that is actually keeping them until the waters return to normal temperature. And they thrive when they are frozen and then replanted in the areas from which they came, or different areas around Florida and the Caribbean. And they then have the ability to not only regrow themselves, but grow similar species to themselves and recreate, or even for the first time, create coral reefs that are once again beautiful. They're not bleached, they're not brown, which means they're dead, but in fact are multicolored again. And so humans at least have the morality and the the technical abilities to resurrect these beautiful beings, and hopefully they will join us late into this century and maybe even into the next. So keep our fingers crossed. And as of this program, we would like to just acknowledge Mr. Jimmy Buffett, who was a great environmentalist in terms of the water and in biology. Ironically, his group was called the Coral Reefers, and he has donated a lot of money and a lot of concert time to the waters around his adopted state. And may he rest in peace, because he's done some really outstanding work and sensitized a lot of partygoers to the importance of keeping the waters, the seas, the lakes, the rivers clean. And with that, let us turn to the subject of the day. And Letitia, let's start with you.
Well, I'll start by letting the audience know some information that actually affects them directly. And that's that 22 million research animals are estimated to populate U.S. laboratories at any given time at a cost of $14 billion annually to the taxpayer. So that should be looked at, I think, because 98% of the drugs tested on animals never are sold in stores. The current way that it had been being done, and to some extent is still being done, does not eliminate the toxicity of so many drugs, which is why they never wind up making it to the stores. In fact, there's over 1,055 animal testing facilities in the United States, and the average facility may have as many as 20,850 animals on site. Worldwide, you have over 192 million research animals. It's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous with modern technology.
Well, my experience in this very difficult area of research goes back to the 1970s, and I was working in a library of a pharmaceutical company in central New Jersey. And the name no longer exists. They've been bought out and bought out again. However, they're from Basel, Switzerland, but that's as close as I'm going to get. But the library that I was working with was right next to the lab. And what was in the lab every day were beagles.
Oh, my God.
Right. And so I had to hear their crying every day, and even a guy in my 20s, I went in there, kind of, what the hell are you guys doing? And they, of course, explained that this research was necessary for the betterment of humanity. And that's such a moral quandary, because let's assume in the 1970s, there wasn't the technological ability to not harm animals, and they said, of course, the argument you just heard from Tisha is that this will benefit humanity and will help us all.
No, quite the contrary. I think that even in the 1970s, it was ridiculous the way that animals were being used, both for medical research and for cosmetic research and everything else. It was absurd, because even back then, they were not solving the question of toxicity. And even back then, 98% of the drugs tested on animals never could be used. So those animals suffered for nothing.
Well, I think the question that listeners want to ponder is the very basic one, is at a time when many would say that technology wasn't up to snuff, and the people working in the labs absolutely believed that what they were doing was morally correct.
This is an assumption on your part. I think there was money involved.
No, actually, I was actually there, dear.
I know that you were there, but you're assuming that the people
believe what they're saying. Do not cut me off from my own life experience.
Yes, I'm not cutting you off from that. I'm cutting you off from an assumption. An assumption is very different from fact.
Yeah, right. And you're the one who's assuming I was there, you weren't. Now, maybe you thought you were there, maybe
Do you even know why beagles were being used? Do you know why beagles in particular? Why were beagles in particular being used?
Beagles were being used for the testing numerous drugs, and they also had a cosmology department. They were also being used possibly for adornment for women and men and various fragrances. All of that was going on, and I did talk to. I was there.
Let me clarify something as soon as you're finished.
I worked there for 6 weeks. Yeah,
fine,
when I'm finished. You said it yourself.
Yes,
that's
when
enough,
you're finished, I'm going to clarify something.
Good. Now, yes, they did absolutely believe it. You could see it in their eyes, and they worked there very diligently.
Oh, crap. See it in their eyes.
Yeah, okay. Well, since you weren't there, I guess you do know better than I, even though you are even allergic to local stories. So I'm sure you're the authority on this. But even though you weren't there... I am,
having done a number of shows on this issue. I absolutely am.
Okay.
And having talked to a number of scientists in the past. So continue.
Okay. Yes, I will. And though I was there... for next to the lab for over 6 months. And yes, there was an enthusiasm for the project, and they were very happy to do it. The question that I would leave for people listening is, what would you do if you were not aware of any technology that could substitute for animal experimentation? Would you, in fact, continue that work, or would you, have a conscience and say, I can't do this anymore. I don't know what we're getting out of it. But understand that particularly half a century ago, Big Pharma was not opposed by any real segment of the American people and or the world people, and they had a lot of credibility because it was right after the terramycin product development that Big Pharma was very well thought of at the time, and so you didn't think to question their methods. Having said that, I was very uncomfortable with it, and I was wishing to heck that didn't have to happen. So that was very hard to work there. So the question is, if you were alive in the 70s, where would you fall on this question? And even now, with much greater technological alternatives, where would you fall? Would you continue to work on animals for the hope of creating new pharmaceuticals to help man, or not? And I would just the part of that answer is, I will tell you, there are a lot more pharmaceutical drugs that are created in university labs and in medical schools that have been coming out with Big Pharma, and that's with Big Pharma having to or wanting to advertise on television with their latest products that they hope you ask their doctor about. So they're nice hands. They don't have quite the record that university medical labs have, and so we question that, and we question their pricing. But please go ahead and enlighten us about what technology and what alternatives are there today that would yield equal or better results.
I will. But first, I'm going to clarify the issue with the beagles. The reason that beagles in particular were used, and this is based on research, all right, not on opinion, is the fact that they found that the beagles of all the dogs, of all the canines that could be used for research, are the ones that most closely bond to human beings, are the ones that, despite how they're treated, continue to love and have affection for human beings, and so are continue to being abused more than once. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that the dog that most loves human beings is most abused by human beings. And the fact of the matter that back in the 70s, 98% again of the drugs that they developed were failures because of toxicity. Okay, so these animals were being trashed by nothing. And when I say to you, that I question their sincerity, just to give you one example, Charles River, which is one of the laboratories that supplies animals, all right, for experimentation. How about this? Okay, their revenue was $3.98 billion in 2022. So believe me, it's not because they all feel, that this is work that they're doing for humanity. There's a lot of money here that's being made, and a lot of lives of animals. And not only that, when you consider that animals, and this again is research, have the emotional capability of a child 2 to 3 years old, it's inexcusable. Whatever you would not have put a child through suffering, you should not put an animal through suffering. Now, as far as alternatives, okay, one, there should have been, before I even get into that, there should have definitely been more oversight and restrictions on the animals that were being used and abused. And mind you, I'm one of the people that first helped PETA get underway as an activist group.
Well, we will take a break. Now it's a good time for us to dance, and maybe for you to dance as well. And we'll be back in just a moment with more, hopefully, Civil Dissent. Well, welcome back to Civil Dissent. We want to do some shout-outs before we return to topic, and we'd like to shout out to our friend Peter at Scotch and Good Conversation, and that's the podcast produced right here in Orlando again, and that's the program that interviews and asks really good questions to really dumb people, and I think he does a really great job. And as you might imagine, we were on it, and we urge you to go to Scotch and Good Conversation. We want to also shout out to Banks Helfrich, who does a monthly what he calls a dance party at Winter Park Library. It's the third Thursday of every month, and it is 7 p.m., and you're going to hear either very, very heated but knowledgeable debate and or a spokesperson on any subject concerning the community who's willing to, after speaking, spending a lot of time on Q&A and is very open to other points of view. And we also want to talk about and shout out for Sally Ann Leslie, who's, again, Orlando-based podcast, and it's called Reclaiming Pride, and that's a very prominent podcast. And my goodness, Orlando, Florida is really burgeoning as a podcast-based community. And of course, we want to thank San Julian's Cafe, who have been nurturing us physically, psychologically, and calorie-wise for the last few months. And, of course, best of all, Castle Door Studios, where if the Beatles were one once again, we know that they would eschew Abbey Road for Castle Door Studios. It would be really an uptick in their technical capabilities, and it's located right here in Winter Park, Florida. Go check us out. And now we will. Here,
I agree.
Yes, well, that's about the only thing. And so getting back to the discussion on morality and medical research and the idea of investigating animals in this manner, I would simply say that we don't know for sure. I can't tell you, and I don't think anyone else can.
I was about to discuss alternatives, remember?
Yes, and I just wanted to say that we don't fully know why they used beagles. We can't do that.
Yes, that was well-researched. You don't fully know, but it was well-researched.
No,
and having done other programs and having spoken to scientists.
You don't know what products they were trying to develop.
Everything from cosmetics to everything from cosmetics to
Your
drugs for
analysis
people.
is from the outside in, which is very sloppy.
No,
Completely sloppy. Sloppy is
that
not
just shows
being there.
Sloppy is
it's
just
not
your
being on the
insecurity.
floor.
Sloppy is your
I was
insecurity
there,
from not
honey.
knowing.
Sorry.
We're not talking about being there. Being there is
Being
subjective.
there is life.
Okay, so let me go to the alternatives. To begin with, computer modeling of heart, lungs, kidney, and digestives are now the goal. Why? Because they've realized you eliminate the variability on the toxins and ineffective drugs, okay? Now, they didn't have that kind of expertise back then, but they have it now. So there's no excuse for having the statistics that I just cited before on how many animals are still in laboratories. Not only that, but guess what they found? They found that even using the tissue from the deceased owners is more effective than what they've been doing to a lot of animals. They've also found that there are human volunteers who can provide tissue, which is also more effective and accurate than what they've been doing with animals, because more and more they're realizing the disparity in using animals. Organs on chips have been developed, and those include everything from liver on chips to stomach chips to intestines to brain to skin, among others. Not only to mention as well the eye tissue that they've been able to use without having to blind. And you talk about meeting people. I met a researcher who was essentially blinding pigeons because he was trying to determine how pigeons so accurately can peck at their food. I mean, how ridiculous is that? To start blinding so you could see how accurately. And what was he developing this for? Among other things, he was developing it for military use in terms of honing equipment to be able to zero in on things. I mean, it's absurd. Not only that, but there's all sorts of 3D bioprinting that's taking place, again, with different tissue. And that reduces the predictability gap between what works and what doesn't work, between the differences between animals and people, which, by the way, is apparently, according to scientists they recognize now, only about a 2% difference in DNA between, for example, primates and human beings.
Sure. Yes, and I agree with everything you just said. I think that we... as a species, now, thank goodness, we have the ability to leave animals in peace and to respect them as fellow beings on this earth. And I think that everything that has been done to simulate what was the methodology of half a century ago is very exciting and excellent, and I couldn't agree more that there's less and less reason to do experimentation on animals. I think it's at this point it's cruel, it's unnecessary. I think intuitively people, at least I, and many, many, many others, felt very badly about the old way of doing things. And I'm happy to say that animals in general have been treated far more humanely than they were in the past. Thus, there are no animals in the Ringling Brothers Circus anymore, and shamus at the various SeaWorlds have been retired. And so there have been notable, quantifiable improvement in animal treatment, and we also have sanctuaries for elephants and for primates and for all kinds of beings, even whales. And that shows that over the last half century, we've been learning a little bit. We've been understanding the intelligences a little bit, their emotional development a little bit, and it's we who've been ignorant, not they. And it looks like we're coming up against it already. So I want to say that this has been a pleasure, and I'm so glad that Letitia's been bringing up issues of saving animals from torture and suffering. And ours here on Earth, I believe, is to relieve suffering in any way, shape, or form that we have it. So thank you for bringing that up, Tisha. And what more can you add to our exit party?
Well, I'd just like to say that the National Research Council recommends an end to animal research, among many others. And despite the fact that there's an Animal Welfare Act, too much testing still goes on, and too much abuse still goes on. But if you would like to contact organizations and become a bit of an activist on an issue that needs you very badly, please look at our website, because we will have some leads and contacts there for you. And Ron, it's been fun.
Oh, absolutely. I can't remember when I've had such a good time, and now I can stop stabbing myself in the leg. And so can I invite you out for a little bourbon and scotch after the show?
Well, certainly for something. We need something.
Okay. Yes, well, I have an apothecary in my briefcase. So with that, I want to thank you very much for listening. Our website is civildissent.com, and I think you'll have all the resources you need as we put them up. It's very important for you, and we both urge you to contact civic organizations, political organizations, cultural organizations, and have your voice heard in the community. Without you, we're nothing, and democracy dies, and we cannot afford to let that happen. So thanks for listening, and we look forward to next time with you joining us on Civil Dissent. Thank you for listening to Civil Dissent. If you agreed with a view you've heard today, or if you have thoughts of your own, go to our website, civildissent.com, to find references where you can make a real difference. Take action, and see you next time on Civil Dissent.